You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast, hosted by the founder of Better Beings, Michelle Zellner. Michelle's experiences have equipped her with knowledge and perspective, and for nearly 3 decades, she has been informing, influencing, and inspiring thousands on their journeys. This show spotlights guests of diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise, but they all align with Michelle's purpose and passion to help you be a better human being. There is something for everyone on their way to a healthier, happier life. Enjoy the show.
Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the Be a Better Being podcast. This is episode 150, released on November 24th, the start of Thanksgiving week here in the U.S., and we're barreling into the holiday season. My guest today has such an incredible story of love, loss, healing, hope, and with the holidays being a difficult time for many because of life situations, I thought her insights would offer some comfort, some inspiration. I mean, whether you're facing these challenges or not, I think there's so much that she has to share. Ginger Vigil is a curious soul who finds joy, beauty, and magic in the smallest details. From the garden to the kitchen to her art studio, her creativity knows no bounds. Believing in the power of connection and healing, one person at a time, Ginger is a passionate mental health advocate and spreads light in unexpected ways. She recently released her memoir, Somewhere Between You and Me, Finding Light in the Quiet Between Goodbye and Hello, which is a tapestry of self-discovery and romance, chronicling her journey of finding love amidst the shadows of grief, terminal illness, and CPTSD. I also have a personal connection to Ginger, as she is my liaison at the City of Denver Department of Human Services Department, coordinating their well-being trainings every month. So Ginger, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here. And I'm thrilled to share anything and everything about my book that you would like to know.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because that is what we're here to talk about. But before we dive into all of that, I would just, love to give the listeners a little bit of backstory. I know there's a lot of backstory, which is why I wrote a book, but maybe just, some of the high level stuff and sharing to how you came to even wanting to write this book. And then we'll dive into all of that story.
Okay. So I met my husband in a really unusual way. I met him at his first wife's memorial service. I did not go there to look for a husband. I went to help a friend, anticipated working in the kitchen to help because, there's always food and things like that in the background that go on at services. And it turned out that the person who had passed, her husband, who was planning everything, was a chef. So he had everything taken care of. So I ended up sitting through a stranger's memorial service, and that's how we met. As our story unfolded, we would hear from a lot of people, oh, you should tell this story. Oh, you should tell this story. And we would do the whole, nobody wants to hear our story. That is so silly. We're not going to do it kind of thing. And what finally pushed me to that was I was talking to a friend on Facebook about something, and I mentioned how my husband and I had met. And their friend, who I was not a friend with but could see my post, commented on that post and said, this has really helped me. And I asked her why, and she said, because I am dying of stage 4 ovarian cancer, and I'm really worried about my husband and what's going to happen to him when I'm gone. And she said, you need to write a book so that people know that there's hope out there. And I was like, oh, darn, I'm going to have to write the book. So I wrote the book. And that's how it all started.
I love that. So just for some context, obviously he was married. His wife had passed.
Mm-hmm.
Had you been married before? Relationships? What's your history?
I had been married. I married a young man that I met in high school. It was a interesting relationship. I have 2 beautiful children from that relationship, but it really sucked the life out of me. It made me forget who I was. It made me lose self-esteem. It made me just become a shadow of myself. And I knew when I chose to leave for the sake of my children and I, that I had a road of recovery for myself because I had stopped doing everything that I loved. I wasn't writing. I wasn't doing art. The only thing I really kind of did do was I made my children Halloween costumes. So that was how I kind of had my creative outlet. I knew that I needed a better relationship. And so I left my first husband and really just decided that I needed to figure out what was best for me. In that process, a friend of mine asked me if I had ever written a list of what I wanted in a man. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to say, because who does that? And she actually brought up a really great point. And that point was that as women, we are taught to nurture, to comfort, to support, and to be small, and not to use our voices to say this isn't good for us. And all of those things, especially my generation and older, I think the younger generations are starting to get a little bit stronger in that and understanding their worth in a different way. So I really wanted to look into what she had said, which was, we as women, we make compromises. We'll say, oh, they're really good wage earners, so it doesn't matter if they never come home on Fridays. Or, oh, they are really good with the kids, so it doesn't matter if they never, ever pitch in with anything in the household. And that was kind of the situation I was in. So I wrote a list of 100 things, thinking kind of in my little practical magic moment, because that's one of my favorite movies. I'm going to write this list, and this person is either going to exist like he did in the movie, or he's not going to exist. But either way, I felt like I was going to nail it. So I wrote 100 items on this list, and I went into everything. I went into habits and looks, and honestly, just looks alone, I didn't think he would exist. I really love Latin men. I think they're beautiful. I think they are amazing. And the first 3 things on my list were, I wanted him to be a Latin man. I wanted him to have at least 6 foot in height. And those 2 things right there don't typically go together. So I was like, oh, if these 2 pieces nail it, I'm going to be doing well. And I even went into the really intimate things as women that we sometimes think about when we have an intimate partner. And I put that list away. And I was like, okay, universe, you know what I need. This is it. Let me know when he's here. And I went to therapy and I went to the gym. I really hated going to the gym, but I went anyway. And it was several years before my coworker, who also worked for the city of Denver, told me that her friend had passed away in Alaska of cancer. And she needed a ride to those services. And that's how I ended up at the services where I met Ray.
That is remarkable. So we're going to get more into that story, but I want to go back to your healing journey. So at what age did you, I like a little details. How long were you married? How old were your kids when you decided to make that really scary decision? And how old were you at that point?
Okay. I married young. I was just 20 when I got married. I wasn't even old enough to drink at my own reception, so that was exciting. My first husband and I, were married 16 years, but together for 18. And when I decided to leave, he had gotten into some trouble with some substances that scared me, because all I could think was, if CPS is ever notified, my children are going to be taken from me. And I've never even touched any of the things that he was doing. So for their safety and my own sanity, that's why I chose to leave. They were 13 and 10. So at really instrumental ages, my son was the 13-year-old and my daughter was the 10-year-old. And I was terrified to leave. I had never lived on my own. I went from being a child in my parents' home to a married woman with children. I didn't even know how to get my own apartment. It was the scariest thing I had ever done in my entire life. So I started apartment hunting, and I got a therapist for me and for my children, and all three of us went individually and as a group. It was really important to me that they had the opportunity to understand that none of this was their fault, that parents are completely separate at times from their children, that we are our own individual humans, and we have goals and dreams and horrible things that we need to deal with just like they do. And so I wanted to be sure that they understood that they were okay and that I was okay, and that their dad, while he was dealing with issues, he was not a bad person. He was just a sick person, and that it was safer for us not to be with him. Not to brag, but I have amazing children. They are now 37 and 33, and they have wonderful lives. They're homeowners. They work at very reputable places, and I am one of the few people that I think that can brag that their children has never been in trouble with drugs, in trouble at school, in trouble with the law, no pre-teen pregnancies or anything, although that is kind of hitting me now because I don't have any grandbabies, but they did really well, and they have continued that pursuit of taking care of themselves and lean into therapy when they're having a rough time. And I just love that I was able to look at that scary journey that way and teach them that, hey, bad things are going to happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean the end of everything. It could mean the beginning of something wonderful.
Well, I mean, you should brag, and I will brag for you. Absolutely, that is something to celebrate and be proud of, because I can't even imagine how the fear of the unknown, like you said, going from your parents' house to having lived with a husband and a family unit for 16 years and now going out on your own. And so many women, to your point, won't make that decision because it's just easier, and I'm using air quotes for those who can't see me, it's easier to stay, right?
Absolutely.
And this really just plays into one of my many mottos, hard now or harder later. So you did that hard now and probably avoided a lot harder later for yourself as well as your kids. So anybody who's listening who thinks, oh, I can't do that because, right? I don't know how to make it on my own. I've never been on my own. I can't afford it. It's too hard. The kids will be fine. They're resilient. It sounds like you were so emotionally evolved to think through all of that at I mean, still a relatively young age, mid-30s, right? That's still relatively young.
I was 34.
Yeah.
I think it's because I was a child of divorce. And my parents divorced, oh gosh, let me see. It would have been in the early 70s. So families weren't looked at the same way when they broke up like that. I didn't have access to my father after my mom and dad broke up. I literally saw him one time after that, and it was when he and I bumped into each other at a store. I look very much like my father. I mean, I actually, minus the blue hair, look just like my father. And when I saw him, I was like, oh, hi. And he had no idea who I was. He was so deep in the alcoholism that had driven my mother to leave him that he couldn't even recognize his own child. And I didn't want my kids to have that kind of a story in their life. I wanted them to be like, okay, yeah, we are children of divorce, but our mom did this and our dad did this. And while he didn't do as much as he could, he did some things. He tried to do things that were helpful for them, and he maintained contact. They are still in contact with their father. They have grown a lot because when I left him, they were not happy, and I don't know any child that would be. But as they grew and they healed and they became adults of their own, they actually told me that they were really glad that I made the choice that I did, because it helped them see that loving themselves over a bad relationship was really important. And it has helped them make really good choices as adults.
Yeah. Well, you broke the generational narrative, and so many people, and I cannot speak personally because it's never been my situation, but I know when they stay together for the kids, it usually, in my experience of working with people and having people in my life, it usually doesn't work out better, right? Now, who's to say, right? Because you can't live a parallel life and see how it would have worked out the other way. But you modeled that behavior for them. And that's so powerful for them going forward. And of course, they're not going to be happy while it's happening. And I think that's a big reason why people hold back from making those hard decisions, right? Because it's going to be too hard now. So we'll do that to make it easy now. And then we have harder later to deal with. And so, yeah, I think just how emotionally evolved you were at relatively young age to have that foresight and do that hard decision. And now here you are getting to brag about it, as you should, and thinking about what they have in place for themselves and, whatever their future families look like.
And the bonus for me really was, once I met Ray and had him in my life, he was able to model, especially for my daughter, what a good husband would be. And that was really important to me. I knew that my son already had some great ideas on how to be a good man because I have a father and brothers that were instrumental. But my daughter is the only female born into our family after my sister and I. So she has a ton of male cousins, but there are no other girls. And I was concerned that she wouldn't have the right role models for that particular piece. And so having my new husband treat me the way I always wanted to be treated, and honestly, the way I think women deserve to be treated, was a huge bonus for me. And she has even said that getting to see that treatment has really made her. She actually told me recently, I'm really glad that you left Dad because you are in such a beautiful place and have such a wonderful relationship with Rad. That's what they call him. That she just is so supportive of the decision that I made. And I love that.
Well, and that's got to just feel really good, right? And validating. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So you meet Ray at his wife's funeral. Let's take it from there.
Okay. So I went with a friend. Her two children were teenagers, and one of them was actually Ray and Kim, that was his first wife, was their goddaughter. And it was really important for me to be sure that somebody that I knew that was grieving and who had children that were grieving, that they had that opportunity to say goodbye. We live in Denver. The services were in Pueblo, Colorado, so it wasn't going to be easy for them to get there because my friend didn't have a car at that time. So when I met Ray, it was actually after the services. So, things are pretty packed and hectic when you're starting those, and you don't really kind of start introducing people until afterwards. And he was actually standing at a display table that he had made that had Kim's cremains on it. It had flowers on it, and it had her art because she was also an artist. And some of the art that was on there, she had actually taken when you are having radiation, they will create this kind of wire cage that sits over your head, face, neck, and shoulders to keep you in place because you can't move while they're doing it. It's really important that you're still. And when she was done with her radiation, she made plaster molds of her screen that would hold her in place. It was her face, and turn those into these incredibly painted masks. So those were on the wall as well. And when my friend introduced me to Ray, she was like, "This is my friend Ginger." And his first comment to me was, "That's an unusual name." Well, I'm pretty used to that. It is my actual name. It's not short for anything. And then we ended up helping him take that display down. And just watching this man through the services, do the eulogy for his wife, watch him so carefully take down this display, just made me think, what kind of man is this? Who cares to this extent when something so traumatic has happened? I mean, they battled her cancer for 5 years before she passed, and it made him lose jobs. It caused health issues for him, and he never wavered. And I know that for women, that's pretty common. It's not as common for men. I think that a terminal illness can be terrifying for anyone, but I think historically men tend to leave before women will. And so that made me curious, just about him as a person, not as a, ooh, hey, this guy's really cute. I hadn't gotten there yet. And so I just didn't think anything other than that. We went to the reception. He was like a lone island amidst all of these people walking around. It was like nobody went up to him and said, are you okay? Do you need anything? How can I help? They just wandered around him. It was the oddest thing. I was like, he is completely alone in a crowd. So I went up to him and asked him if I could do anything for him, if he needed anything. And he said no, and that was okay. And I told him to take care of himself. And we went on about our business. But it turned out that Ray and I have been orbiting each other in our lives since childhood, but we had never met. We lived within a block of each other. We both worked at Elitch's when it was off of 38th and Tennyson in the same building, but on opposite sides. We ended up knowing most of the same people, even though he went to North High and I went to Denver West. And so after that reception, as he started to rebuild his life, I kept running into him. I'd go to a concert with friends and he'd show up with other friends and be in the same group. I'd go to a picnic at a park and he'd be there. And every time I saw him, I just was like, what's going on? I could feel something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I just knew it was something important. And one day, after months and months of these bumping into each other, he came up to me and said the cutest thing. And because I am not always the sharpest tack on the block, he said, I've lost my phone number. Can I have yours? And I looked at him and was like, how is that going to help you? I mean, just boom, right over my head. And it wasn't until he kind of quirked his eyebrow that I realized what he was asking. And I was like, all right, kind of scary. This man just lost his wife. What am I getting into? So I gave him my number and we actually had a lot of conversations. I can't tell you how many talks that we had sitting outside of Sloan's Lake, watching the moon come up over the water, or just talking on the phone, him at one place and me at my home, and really getting to know each other at this really deep, deep level. I found out that he had lost a brother to suicide, that he had been raised Jehovah's Witness, that he was not a spiritual person because that had really caused a lot of trauma, which is pretty normal, I think, for a lot of people that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. He told me all about Kim's battle with cancer and what it did to them as a couple. He also explained to me that because she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer, that it changes the relationship you have with your intimate partner, especially if you're a woman, because they don't want you to introduce what could be germs into your body. So they went from intimate husband and wife to truly a caregiver and a patient relationship that lasted for 5 years. So when he finally decided that he wanted to ask me for our first date, I already knew at that time that he had been mourning his relationship with his first wife for years. And that when she had finally passed, even though he still loved her, it was a lot of relief for him because he knew she was no longer suffering. And so that first date was actually a huge clue to both of us, because when Kim was battling her cancer and after a doctor's appointment with her oncologist had told them, there's nothing more I can do for you. There's no more treatments. I mean, maybe there are trials, but they're super expensive and there's no guarantee. And really, you should probably just get your affairs in order. And it was when they went home that day that she told Ray that they needed to talk. And he was like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And she said, I want to talk about what's going to happen to you when I'm gone. And he instantly was like, no, we're going to try the trials. We're going to do whatever we can. We don't need to have this conversation yet. And she really pushed and said, no, this is important. We need to have this conversation. You're drinking too much. You're not eating. I'm really scared about what's going to happen to you. And he was like, okay, let's talk. An important detail to know about them is they listened to music a lot. Always had the radio on, always had some kind of music going on. Ray is a huge music aficionado. He can tell you stories about music that will just blow your mind. And while they were having this conversation, a song came on. And when this song came on, Kim kind of like had a zoned out look. And he thought that maybe the meds that she'd taken were making her sleepy or something was happening. And he was like, babe. And she said, the next time you hear this song, you'll be with the person that I've sent you. Well, that completely cemented it for him that the meds were getting to her. And he was like, oh, okay. And she was like, no, I'm serious. That song was Jerry Rafferty's Right Down the Line. On our first date, where we were driving to Mother Cabrini Shrine, that song started playing on the radio. And Ray lost it. And all I could think was, what have I gotten myself into? And I looked at him and I said, are you okay? And he told me that story. And because I am a firm believer in there is no such thing as a coincidence, I believe that we are all connected and that the universe sees what we need and helps guide us if we pay attention to the signs. And I told him, oh, okay, so then I guess the rest is up to us. And I think that blew his mind because I'm sure he was expecting somebody to go, dude, you have lost it. And I didn't. I firmly believe that that is something that can happen. I know that our loved ones, while their bodies are gone, they are never fully gone. They are always doing things to guide us and to reassure us if we just pause and watch and listen to what's going on around us. I mean, there are things that you can't explain that fits into that so well and nothing else.
So again, for context, how long after his wife's passing was this? How many years had you been out of your relationship and doing your healing journey?
Oh, okay. So I had been out of my relationship. I actually left my ex on Valentine's Day in 2003. This was January 2011 when I met Ray. So I had been apart and on my healing journey for a long time. Ray and I went on our first date, and this is going to floor a lot of people, in May of 2011. So just 5 months after.
So I'm curious about the reaction and the response of that from your family, his family, right? Because I think it's important to understand, because I know people go through this, right? And there's going to be judgment. There's going to be questions. There's going to be comments. There's going to be all kinds of things. So I'm curious what that looked like for you.
It was a lot. My family was pretty supportive, mostly because they know me and they know that I tend to make pretty good judgments, pretty good calls, and for the most part, minus an ex-husband who got into things that I couldn't have foreseen, everything in my life had really been pretty decent. The girl that needed the ride to tell her friend goodbye was so angry that she stopped talking to me, and we have not talked since. So I lost a friend in that. I did try and talk to her and ask her if she could tell me why she was so bothered by this. And she couldn't. She either didn't have the words or didn't care enough to do it. But so I lost that friend. Ray has no contact with his family because of the things he endured as a child. So there was not really any concern there. Everybody else, though, thought it was amazing. I mean, my own mother said that we were like two halves of a whole that finally found each other. And when your mom can say that, it doesn't matter if you lose a friend here or there on what's going on. So it was not easy, but it was our life. And that was really the focus. You can't date people or love people based on what your friends and family think. You have to do what's good for you. So that's what we did.
And I think too, to your point before, you had gone to therapy, you had decided like, I need to find me, be strong in who I am before, I enter into something. And that he had also done very much the grieving, but I think there still is the finality of it, right? So
Absolutely.
what was his grieving process like once there was the finality of she is truly no longer here? And how did that impact your new relationship going forward?
Well, something that I think is very sweet that Ray did is he was actually there with Kim in the hospital when her last moments were occurring. And he actually told her, like, put his arm around her and kind of held her up off of the bed and said, I know you're tired. And if you want to go, it's okay. I'll be all right. And within seconds of that sentence being said, she flatlined. And he then actually that evening tried to take his own life. He was not prepared, even though he had been grieving. He was not prepared for the final moments. And I don't think even when you're dealing with someone with a terminal illness that you are. Grief is interesting. It will appear in strange places when you're going through something. Because Ray's story wasn't over, he woke up the next day to his friend pounding on the front door. And that friend helped him get his stuff from Alaska and get back to Colorado. Once he was in Colorado, I honestly think that Ray's grief was as successful as it was because I was there to help him. We started out as friends first. And I mean, our 5-month friendship before we started dating was so intense when it comes to the things we talked about and the things that Ray did for himself, the things that I did for him, and surprisingly enough, things that he did for me that I thought I had fully healed that turned out I hadn't. Because no matter what, the experiences we have live in our bodies, and we can think we have 100% addressed all of them. And then something can come up and it sends us right back to whatever that issue was. And we need to start all over again. And we both really were helping each other. I realized fairly soon after Ray and I started dating that he had to have PTSD from his caregiving experiences. Didn't even think at that point that it was probably also from the other traumas he'd experienced as a young man. And after a reaction that he had when he went to have his hands checked because he has bilateral carpal tunnel, I told him that he reminded me of my grandfather, who was one of the navigators for the Enola Gay, who had severe PTSD. And that put him on a path for his own pursuit of therapy and how do I manage this and live with this. And we just kind of learned how to do it together. He learned how to live with it. I learned how to love someone who's living with it and how to support him. And his grief for Kim has really, it was part of the early part of our relationship. We had her cremains and the dried flowers from her service in a little memorial place in our home after we had started living together. I helped him scatter her ashes. We have a picture of her that hangs in our home. And a lot of people kind of freak out about that because they're like, how could you have his first wife in your home like that? How could you? And I'm like, well, first off, there is no way that she's going to be able to come back. I mean, she's no threat. So there's no reason for me to be concerned about that. And it would be incredibly selfish of any person to say, now that you know me, you can no longer love the person you used to love. That didn't make sense to me because the journey he had with Kim helped make him who he was. And without her, our story would have never started. So it made sense to have her be a part of our life.
That is,
and I still ask him questions about her.
Well, and honestly, Ginger, I hope everybody listens to that over and 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 over.
Yes.
Because I think in any scenario, as people transition through relationships in life, whether it's because of breakups or because of death or whatever,
mm-hmm.
so many people just want the prior to not have existed.
Yep.
And if anything shows up from the prior, well, it must be that you think less of us or of me, and my goodness, I mean, this is exactly, I think, why your story is so important, because when people can take that approach and that perspective and realize that, yes, this is called life and everybody has had life before us and there will be life after you. And approaching it that way is such a beautiful, healthy, kind, honest, realistic way to do it. And it just makes everything easier and better, right?
It does. I was actually really surprised by how many women, not men, but women, who were mortified that I had included Kim's life in our journey. I mean, she's still a part of, we still have that picture hanging in our home, and we've been together for 14 years. So I would just tell them every single time, I am not Kim. Kim is not me. And as human beings, we are capable of loving more than one person. It doesn't mean that his love for Kim is any less than it ever was. And it doesn't mean that he can't love me fully. So that's how it really was.
Well, and I think that's why 14 years later, you're still as strong and have this amazing relationship. So we just have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure that you have addressed, some of the real highlights of the big lessons, the big takeaways that you've learned. And obviously you have many, many years ahead to go, but maybe something that might be helpful for someone out there who's struggling with some kind of relationship transition, or, even death is something we don't ever like to talk about, but that, Kim had that conversation with him and gave permission that he gave her the permission to go. It's going to be okay. Right. Yeah. I mean, maybe just share a couple of really big high points that someone can latch on to and make an experience for them maybe a little easier.
I think the biggest things that I would recommend to anyone is to lead with compassion. If we are kind to each other, regardless of the situation, that's going to help us lead the way. I'm highly empathetic, so it was very easy for me to feel for Ray and his story. I know not everybody is as empathetic as I am, but we all have some version of being able to understand what people have gone through. Lean into that. It's what we would want if we were going through something horrible. So everything that you actually need, you're probably already using. The compassion, the empathy, love, a lot of patience, and humor. Oh, we had so much laughter in the midst of the grief, because grief in a lot of ways is like being adrift in the ocean. You never have any idea how big those waves are going to be. And sometimes the sun's kind of nice and the waves are pretty smooth and you can have a great day. You just have to be ready for when they come again. And that's really what I did, is I led with that compassion and that empathy and that love. It's always been what's been important to me in the first place. That's probably why Kim chose me. It's something that Ray and I both have wondered. She had to have seen something or known something about how I would approach Ray on this journey and how good we would be for each other. So I would definitely, compassion, empathy, and love. Those can never lead you astray.
I love that. And I will say, both of you, the willingness to do the work, right? You were willing to do your work on you. He was willing to do his work on him. When you shared with him, I think you have PTSD. I suspect a lot of men would fight back on that, get defensive, right? Want to pretend like, oh no, I'm strong. That's not me. And that he was open to hearing that and then to pursue getting help for it. Like that's, I would think, a relatively rare trait in men.
He's very special.
It's the only way that anyone can grow forward, right? So I love that. Do your work, be open, love and compassion and kindness. I mean, that's, I don't know, sounds like be a better being. That's kind of what that sounds like to me.
Absolutely. And we still do therapy. We still reach out for help when we need it. And we work together a lot to support each other through things if therapy for that day or that week isn't available. So it's something that we will probably always do. We go to therapy so that we can manage being around people who don't go to therapy.
There you go. Excellent. Well, Ginger, this has been delightful. And your book is available. I am going to encourage everyone to read it, get it. It sounds like a great, maybe holiday, little good holiday read, sitting by the fire, maybe during Thanksgiving or over your holiday celebrations. Come here in cold, snowy December. But I feel like there's going to be a lot of gems in there for anybody, no matter what their situation. And knowing that probably at some point in life, you're going to be facing something sort of like this. Why not be prepared with a few tips going into that place in life?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. This has been delightful.
Listeners,
you got it. You know what to do. You get to go and be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. We hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.